Hello again, everyone, and welcome to One-on-One. I'm Martin Falls. And for years, I've been sitting, and across the table, we get a guest, and they give us their story. But I have to admit, you see me a lot of times. I don't have a lot of notes. Pride myself on remembering a lot of things. But when we come back from the break, our guest today has a resume so big, you have to cheat a little bit. I have to be honest with you. And he has roots in Louisiana. He has roots here in South Louisiana, and I'm not going to give you his name. You're going to have to stick around, and after the break, you're going to have to find out exactly who I'm talking about. But he continues to help the military grow. He's been a big part of it, and he will be my guest on One-on-One. Don't go away. One-on-One is brought to you by the Law Office of Waits and Downer. So, Lieutenant Commander, it's great to meet you. Great to have you here, and what a decorated career. If my dad was still alive, he'd be sitting right off here listening to every word you're saying. A big Navy man. First of all, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and look forward to telling you a little bit about myself and my career.
And thank you for serving our country. We appreciate that. How does a guy born in New Orleans, go to Jefferson Parish, grew up in the surroundings of Louisiana? When I went over this resume, like I told you before the show started, and I'll tell the audience, you normally don't see me with cheat sheets, but if you look at this, this is why I'm cheating today. The resume is unbelievable. But you don't just become a lieutenant commander. Where did it start? Let's talk about your early days. What's the earliest days you can remember?
That would go back to being over in the Army Parkway, which was a veterans area after World War II. Set up for all the veterans coming home in Marion. And my family lived over in one of those veterans area. So that's over near City Park. And of course now I-10 cuts through there. Mm-hmm. So those were the early days before we moved out into Jefferson Parish. We're pretty much where I grew up, which is now called River Ridge.
Was your father in World War II?
Yes, he was. He was a Navy man, and he came down from Brooklyn with his brother. Mm-hmm. They were at the J. Bennett Naval Air Station up there, and they sent a bunch of the guys to come down and open up the Lakefront Naval Air Station.
Okay.
And they both met local girls, and married and stayed. And then they eventually were sent out to the war. And my father was on the aviation side and what was called anti-submarine warfare. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he went through the war and survived that, and then came back, got out for a little while, and then turned around and went back into the Navy. They realized they'd let so many go that they needed to see if they could bring a few of them back, and he went back in. So kind of myself being what we'd call a Navy brat.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that unique? My dad said he came back and felt so guilty that he left a lot of friends over there because his first tour was over. He re-enlisted, went back with some of my uncles. Wasn't that a special generation?
Unbelievable. The things that they sacrificed without even a second thought. Went off to war not knowing what they would face, where they would go, to struggle through the training that they all had to do. And most of them were just young men. My dad was a city boy, but many of them were from the country.
Right.
And they went all over the world for the first time, going outside of maybe 50 miles of where they were growing up. So I think that's a special generation that we all should look back to with great pride and understand the sacrifice. And I believe some of my work ethics and the way that I look at our nation and that I wanted to do something similar and dedicate my professional life to the country. I think those are the things I think about most.
You said your daddy came from Brooklyn, and y'all hang out in New Orleans. I've always thought the Brooklyn accent and the New Orleans accent have some common characteristics. So you were destined at an early age to have that strong accent, were you?
Most importantly, as soon as I arrived, I remember going up to submarine school, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And the group of young men I was with, as you go around introducing yourself, the guy said, well, which street in Brooklyn did you grow up on? And I looked at him like he was crazy. And he says, I don't believe you're from New Orleans. You've got such a strong Brooklyn accent.
You picked it up and all that. For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm. You were destined to be a Navy man. I mean, you know, I see some families where we were fortunate. We didn't have a war to fight. My generation, it might be the only one. I'm not quite sure of that, but if I had to go into service, I'd have went in the Navy strictly because my daddy was so Navy. Is that what happened to you?
I think so. It was a combination of things. I can remember when they shut down the lakefront and they brought Belle Chase Naval Air Station online, which has now been changed to a joint base. I can remember he was working with the reservists and training them and their craft. And he had what was called a link trainer, where you get in and can simulate some things. And I can remember him taking me over there on a Saturday while he was working, setting me up in one of the rooms, taught me how to work a 16 millimeter projector. And there was all these films from the aircraft camera gun sights, and no voice, just one incident after another. And I would sit there for hours watching that. So you would think I would have gone into the air side, but between that and joining the Sea Scouts, and then sailing out in the lake, and then the Gulf of Mexico, and then we took a trip to the Bahamas as a scout team on a vessel. I think those are all the things that just mold you and say, you know, that's where you're going in life.
You have a very unique position, because like you said, and I'll let you say it how you told me early on, but you went from submarines to, well, aviation. You had such a diverse career inside of the Navy. Most people specialize, but where did it start? Take me on that journey. Where did it start in the Navy? And take me through there and fill in the blanks for me.
Well, when I decided to go into the Navy, at that time, Vietnam was really starting to grow back in '64. And it was clear that my generation was going to get drafted one way or the other. So back in high school, they had a program that you could sign up now, kind of lock you in and take you off the draft board, so to speak. And then after school, you were off to the Navy. And so that program put me into a submarine that was actually located in the Mississippi River as a training craft called the USS Batfish. And although it was just stuck to the pier, that's where I got my first introduction before going off to boot camp and then submarine school. And then today it's called Electronic Technician School, and got my skill set for the rest of my career really became the focus of the work I would be doing in advanced technology.
First steps into that submarine? How old were you, 17, 18?
17 years old. My parents had a sign for me.
Yeah. Were you claustrophobic, anything?
I never even thought of that, although many folks immediately say, I couldn't do submarines.
Yeah.
How could you do that? And I just never had that sense. Only once in my career did I ever feel claustrophobic, and that was when I was doing technical work. And we have a thing in a submarine called the ballast control panel. Mm-hmm. And there was something wrong in the back, and I had to squeeze back behind it. And all of a sudden I realized I couldn't get out. And I felt a little, you had to calm yourself down, right. Stop blowing yourself up, yeah. And slowly wiggle back out. But other than that, I've never had a sense of claustrophobia with that, even though I know my wife and all my friends said, no way they can do that.
Yeah, you're right. Most people have trouble getting in an MRI, more or less a submarine.
Exactly.
But, so when you walked on there, though, take us back, what did you first realize when you walked into the submarine?
Well, the first thing when you go down the hatch, and this is a World War II diesel submarine, mm-hmm. is the smell of the diesel fumes. I mean, that hits you right in the face, and you're in a different world. And it's something you don't understand, you're not familiar with. You're not even going down the ladder correctly. The chief that was taking me down there, chief petty officer, had to instruct me on how to properly go down the ladder without killing myself, mm-hmm. and then walk me through the submarine. And you're overwhelmed by how much they can cram into a submarine, mm-hmm. and all the pipes, the gauges, the valves, the electrical, the electronics. And you go, what have I gotten myself into here? Mm-hmm. Can I even rise to that challenge? Those were the things that I thought. And I can remember at the end of that quick little tour with the chief before we went back up to the training building, and then he kind of looked at me. He says, don't worry. He says, if I can do it, you can do it. And I've always kept that thought with me in everything I've pursued. If that person can do it, I can do it. And that's always been my challenge to accomplish that goal.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm. Did you always have a leadership ability? Did it come from watching your dad, or was your mom involved in? Because, like I said, this resume is pretty doggone good. But did you have that at 17 years old?
I would say I grew up from the leadership from the Navy. Immediately they take you under their wing. You usually have a senior enlisted person in the Navy, which we call a chief petty officer. And I think it's those individuals, those mentors, that I think saw in me that I could rise up to meet the challenges of higher leadership, because they immediately started giving me challenges right off the bat. And the first challenge is just to get qualified. And even though I wouldn't qualify on that old diesel submarine, they took me through and showed me the various aspects of the challenge I was going to, and imbued in me the idea that if you can get through qualifications quickly, that will be a mark for you of your potential to be a leader in this community. So I took that to heart, and then I strived. And I think going back to my mom and dad, especially my mother, every time I wanted something, it was, you have to work for it. You have to show me that you really want it. It's not just a passing thought that you have in your brain.
Work ethic.
It's the work
I always
ethic.
tell people work ethic.
And, I come from a very large family, a family of 6. We didn't have a lot of money. My dad was a Navy enlisted man.
Yeah.
And so every time we wanted something, we had to work for it. And I can remember saying, back in the day, you could go out and collect glass bottles, if you recall. I think it was like you'd get a nickel for the glass bottle. So she would tell me, go out and collect bottles. And then as I got a little older, well, go out and cut grass.
Yeah.
And then when I started doing that, she says, you can cut grass, but you can't use my gas. You have to buy your own gas. So I think it's
how much
those
were you
traits.
making back in the day when you were cutting grass?
Oh, if I got 50 cents, I think I was pretty happy.
And was gas, what, a nickel?
Yeah.
At the time?
Right.
Yeah.
And it was a 5-gallon can would last me pretty good.
Yeah.
And it's just, going around with some of the older folks in the neighborhood who gave me that opportunity. And I
So
can
you
remember.
were making 45 cents cutting grass.
Yeah, exactly.
You were a rich man.
Yeah. And, I was able to take a few pennies, and I was always a joiner, so I wanted to be in the Boy Scouts. And you have to have this little uniform, and my mom said, I can only give you this. If you want the rest of the accoutrements, you have to pay for that.
And that's so cool to hear, because I know I came on the tail end of that with Mom and Dad. They compromised, but they made me work for a lot. They gave us a lot. But in your day growing up, it's all they could offer, because 6 children. Where were you in the pecking order?
I was the third child, the first boy. So 2 girls and then 4 boys.
So a lot was expected of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, some later on in my life, my mom went to work. And so a lot was left to my sisters and myself to accomplish things around the house, because they both came in pretty late.
Yeah, you shared the
day.
middle child duties.
Exactly.
Were you a typical middle child?
I think so. Now that I look back on that. So it was always trying to, I can do that, because they were always having my sister do it. And I would say, wait a minute, I can do those things. So you're constantly being challenged if you want to participate in the family at the upper level.
Plus, eventually, you try to take care of everybody.
Yeah, I think so. And in the military, that's part of leadership. When you get into those roles, it's not about you any longer. It's about your folks, your people, making sure that they have what they need, the right tools, the right guidance, the right leadership. And then, like they taught me in the nuclear Navy, one of Admiral Rickover's saying was, you get what you inspect and not what you expect. Yeah. So I learned that rule pretty early in the submarine career. You've got to go back. You've got to check on your folks. You've got to make sure that they have everything they need, and sometimes they won't ask you for it. You've got to go look at it and help them.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm. This one-on-one program has been brought to you by the law offices of Waits and Downer.